the temperature and the strain rate, at that time, all the data come in a very narrow band. So it can be said that, in fact, the strain rate model can be extended to temperature. And we have the similar numbers for different clays in terms of effects of temperature, but also effects of strain rate. The alpha is 0.04 for inorganic clays. And there is no doubt that there is something fundamental behind this. Limitations now. The strain rate effects applies to plastic strains rather than total strains. Consequences are relatively small in most cases, but fundamentally it's important to indicate that point. When we have a clay which is during secondary consolidation here, so with a decreasing void ratio, if we stop the strain, in fact the strain is constant, the strain rate is 0, so it's constant, and so the effective stress should be constant. It's not the case. During this test, with time, in fact, the pore pressure increases. And so the effective stress is decreasing. And the explanation is given here. If we have soil at a point such as A here, in fact, the plastic strain has a tendency to creep, in fact. The plastic strain has a tendency to increase, and so to go here. But as the strain or void ratio is constant, in fact, the soil has to compensate with an equal value of elastic strain, which is shown here. And to have this, we have to decrease the effective stress. So we have the soil in what we call relaxation test. The soil has to increase its pore pressure. So that's it's not a limitation, but it's a specification of the soil behavior. Finally, in some cases, at very low strain rates or high temperatures, microstructuring, so bonding of the soil, may dominate over viscose effects. And that could be a limitation. So, in conclusion, from laboratory observations, clay behavior is controlled by strain rate and temperature. Now, what happens in situ? In the lab, for most common tests, in fact, the strain rate is larger than 3 × 10⁻⁸ second minus 1. So it's in this range. Now in the field, because the layers are much thicker, in fact the strain rates are smaller and usually less than 3 or 2 × 10⁻⁸ second minus 1. In fact, when we have vertical drains, we see that we increase the strain rate, which makes sense. But the strain rates, typically the strain rates in situ are smaller than the strain rates in the lab. Consequently, in our strain rate model, the compression curve followed in situ should be below the compression curve followed in the lab. Smaller strain rate, effective stress. So it's what we have examined. I remember this figure. So hypothesis A indicates that the compression curve in situ and in the lab would be the same, while hypothesis B indicates that the laboratory curve would be here, while the in situ curve would be below, as shown here. Also, the strain in situ would be smaller with hypothesis A than with hypothesis B. So we have examined this aspect by examining the effective stress strain curves in situ, so under embankment. If we have deep settlement gauges, as for example here, we can define the evolution of strain and strain rate with time. But also if we have the pore pressure, we can define the vertical effective stress and then get the field compression curve, which is the truth. The nature is saying that's the compression curve. And this has been done and compared under 4 test embankments: Berthierville, Gloucester, Saint-Alban, and Väsby in Sweden. And we have in green the compression curve obtained at the end of primary consolidation on high-quality samples, and in red, that's the in situ curve. And we can see that in all cases, the in situ compression curve is below the compression curve obtained at the end of primary on high-quality samples in the lab, which is indicating that at least hypothesis A is wrong. Now, the effective stresses have been plotted in a normalized form here, and we have the rectangulars here for in situ data, and the other points are laboratory data, which is indicating that the in situ behavior is in the continuity or consistent with the laboratory data, and indicating that hypothesis B is the correct one. Now, there are some cases where the data were not so well defined, but we can say that if we have the laboratory curve here in blue and the field curve in green, and if we estimate at a considered strain, if we estimate the pore pressure from the laboratory curve, the excess pore pressure at a given time is LF. But in situ, it should be Fs, with Fs larger than Fl. That's in the logic of the strain rate model. And this can be shown with the case of the Changi Airport in Singapore. Here we have marine clays over about 40 meters, and it's a site where which has been reclaimed. That means, in fact, the airport is built over the sea on these clays. And by considering the 24 hours odometer curves and by adjusting the permeability, they came with excellent correlation between settlements and predicted settlements and measured settlements at different depths. But at the same time, they were not able to have such good agreement in terms of pore pressures. And in all cases, the measured pore pressure was larger than the predicted one, which is, again, in the logic of the strain rate model, with the in situ compression curve below the laboratory one. Now, this has been observed in other cases in UK, in the States, in France, and in Sweden. We'll come back to the case of the VESB test field that I presented before, because we have there an explanation why there is this discussion between hypothesis A and hypothesis B. On the left, you have the figure I presented before, and you can see that there is a difference between the laboratory curve and the in situ curve of about 25 kPa. Okay, Larson and Matson in 2003 reanalyzed the VESB case and came with these conclusions. Without creep, settlement at the end of primary should be 1.4 meter. That settlement was reached in 1966, so about here, whereas there were still about 30 kPa of excess pore pressures, which is 30 is very close to the 25 we have here, in fact. It's similar. But that indicates that hypothesis A is not correct. More recently, a numerical simulation on the basis of high-quality samples and viscous model gives very good agreement in pore pressures and settlement to Degago et al. So all these data confirm the invalidity of hypothesis A and, in fact, the validity of hypothesis B. However, Mesri et al. In 1985 used the VESB data to prove that hypothesis A will be correct. For that, they used, in fact, compression curves obtained on 50 millimeter on specimens taken with a 50 millimeter Swedish standard piston sampler, and these specimens were taken in the 60s. And here you have the field curve here, and in orange you have a compression curve used by Mesri and Choi. And indeed, the two curves are not very different, which explains why they came to the conclusion that hypothesis A was correct. However, you can see here that the curve obtained on the 200 millimeter in diameter Laval sampler is very different and much obtained at much higher stresses. And the explanation is given here. Here we have a compression test obtained with the dash line at the end of primary and the full line after 24 hours. Compression curves obtained with the 200 millimeter Laval sampler in blue and the 50 millimeter Swedish sampler in green. And we can see that the Swedish sampler is disturbing the clay. The pre-consolidation pressure is significantly smaller and the curve is much more rounded. So it is believed that in fact Mesri and Choi got a good agreement because the sampling disturbance was compensating for the viscous effects. Another case is the Kansai International Airport in Japan. It's an airport which has been built offshore Osaka at about 4